Ranger in Time, Danger in Ancient Rome. Author's note. How do we know what we know about ancient Rome when so little was written down? Many of the history keepers of this time were poets and artists. In their verses, sculptures, mosaics, frescoes, and even graffitis, they've left behind details that we can read to learn about this culture. The mosaics in Rome's Galleria Borghese, for example, show several pairs of gladiators fighting. These mosaics were once the floors of Roman houses and are now not only works of art, but an important piece of the historical record. They depict different types of gladiators, all with specific kinds of weapons and armor. The rhetorari, like Quintus in this story, were gladiators who represented fishermen with their nets and their tridents, and the secutors, like Clido, were known for their swords, long shields, and helmets that covered their faces. Some popular books and movies portray gladiator contests as fights to the death every time, but history doesn't support that story. More often, historians now believe that when one gladiator was wounded badly or signaled defeat by raising a thumb or finger, the match would end. While some who lost were then killed at the urging of the crowd, most were spared. They'd be sent back to the gladiator school to see a doctor and then allowed to recover and train so they could fight again. Gladiators were expensive to feed and train, and their managers preferred them not to lose. When Quintus and Clido fight each other in this story, both are declared victors. That's an unusual ending for a gladiator fight, but there is evidence that it happened at least once in history. The poet Martial left behind a rare, detailed account of a match from the opening of the games of the Colosseum in 80 AD, in which two gladiators, Versus and Pyrrhus, fought in a match that seemed as if it might go on forever. Martial wrote that the emperor's declaration of the duel victory in his work called De Spectualis, or On the Spectacles, and it reads, "On end, however, was found the well-matched contest. Equally they fought, equally they resigned. Caesar sent wooden swords to each the palms of victory. Such was the reward that courage and ability received." In researching Ranger in Time, Danger in Ancient Rome, I read many of these historical accounts and also traveled to Italy to see what remains of the world that Marcus and Quintus inhabited. I visited Pompeii, an ancient city whose history was preserved when it was buried by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. Many buildings, sculptures, frescoes, and graffiti survived because the city was preserved in the pumice and ash of Mount Vesuvius for nearly 1,700 years before archaeologists uncovered it. Today, it's still possible to walk through Pompeii's amphitheater and gladiator barracks and to stand on the stepping stones that allowed ancient Romans to cross their busy, dirty streets. Not super clear pictures of her travels to Rome. But my family and I walked along the storefronts and saw counters where food vendors would have called out for people to buy sausages, cakes, and stew with the popular fermented fish sauce called garum. I also spent several days doing research in Rome. While Rome is a very much modern community now, it also remains a full city of ruins. I explored what's left of the Roman Forum, or the Baths of Titus. That was this picture, where Marcus and Ranger searched for Quintus. Reading the ancient poem Seneca's description of public baths helped me to imagine the sights, smells, and sounds of the first century. It reads, "Consider all the hateful voices I hear. When the brawny men exercise with their lead weights, I hear their groans and their gasps. Or when someone else comes in to get a massage, I hear the slap of the hands on his shoulders. Add those who leap into the pool with a huge splash. Besides these, who are at least have normal voices, consider the hair plucker always screeching for customers, and never quiet except for when he's making someone else cry." Each day, walking from our apartment into Rome's city center, we passed the remains of the gladiator school, Ludus Magnus, just up the street from the Colosseum. That was this picture. I imagine what it was like to be Quintus stuck in one of those small cells and preparing for his day in the arena. Half of the small training arenas in Ludus Magnus have been excavated. That means like dug out so you can see it. The other half still sleeps under the city limits, lined with shops and pizza places in the shadow of the Colosseum. Standing in the Roman Colosseum itself, the Flavian Amphitheater, as it was known at the time, was an experience I will never forget. Some of the stone from the ancient amphitheater was hauled away to be used in newer buildings, including St. Peter's Basilica, as Rome moved away from its violent past. But enough remains that it was possible for me to look out over the floors of the great arena and imagine how the crowds might have sounded when Quintus and Cleto stepped out to fight. There's a picture looking at to the Colosseum, that big tall building in the back there. And then this is like a seat looking out to the floor of the arena where the gladiators would have fought down there. You might notice the empty arches. It's like right there. In the next photograph are full of statues on the cover of this book at the time. So all the empty arches here, right? If you look at the cover, she's talking about the statues there. At the time of the Gladiator Games, those arches were indeed filled with painted statues of emperors. There's another picture. Looking from inside the Colosseum, like if you were walking out to the floor, and that's where all the people would sit. Those arches were indeed filled with painted statues of emperors and gods. When we see this kind of ancient Roman sculpture in a museum today, it is almost always a striking plain white. However, by using chemical analysis and ultraviolet light, archaeologists have recently discovered that those classic white sculptures in ancient Greece and Rome were actually painted in bright colors, as you can see. The lower level of the amphitheater has also changed a lot since the time period in which this story takes place. Still, the ruins provide an amazing window to the past. It is still possible to see parts of the elevators and other machinery that slaves used to raise the scenery and wild animals up to the arena floor. It is impossible for me to read about the gladiator fights, to stand at the center of the great amphitheater without wondering how such a brutal sport was allowed to go on. At the time, the gladiator fights were a part of a tradition in ancient Rome. Historians believe it probably began with sacrifices made at funeral ceremonies and evolved into popular entertainment held into large arenas throughout the Roman Empire. The games were free to attend in Rome. Anyone could obtain a ticket and sit with his or her social group. The emperor and senators had the best seats, while the commoners and most women sat in the upper level. Historians believe that the gladiator fights may have been a way for the emperor to keep control of his citizens. Life wasn't easy for the masses in ancient Rome. There were food shortages. The crowded wooden apartments caught fire easily and burned quickly. One of those fires in 64 AD burned for 6 days, then rekindled for another 3 and destroyed more than half of the city. The Roman poet Juvenal best phrased the bread and circuses to describe the emperor's distribution of food and the spectacle of the chariot races and the gladiator games for entertainment as a way to keep the people satisfied to prevent revolts. The end result was not only the loss of human lives, but many thousands of animals as well. Romans' wild animal hunts took on especially big toll on Africa's predators, like the big cats, ranger smells in the amphitheater basement. Historians now believe that lions became extinct in Libya as a direct result of so many animals being captured and brought to Rome for these staged hunts. Poets and writers were among the first to criticize the arena executions, wild animal hunts, and gladiator fights hundreds of years before they ended. Historians have translated a letter that the poet Seneca wrote, urging his friends not to attend the games. The letter reads, "Unhappy as I am, how have I deserved that I must look on such a scene as this? Do not attend the games, I pray you. Either you will be corrupted by the multitude, or if you show disgust, be hated by them. So stay away." While Seneca died in 64 AD, it would be hundreds of years before the gladiator games came to an end. The last known fight at the Colosseum happened in 404 AD. Through archaeology, the study of historical documents, and works of art, historians are still working to understand this world of the gladiators. In fact, ancient Rome itself is still being uncovered and discovered daily. One of our Rome City tours, the guide pointed out a sign that referred to Subway Line C, a project that has been delayed so many times it's become a favorite joke in Rome. It will never be done, the guide said, because you cannot dig in Rome without finding ruins. And then you stop and call in the archaeologists, and then you dig again, and whoa, more ruins. He laughed in frustration at his city's public transit system, but I could only help feeling a sense of wonder over all the secrets that Rome still keeps. Every new find is like waving away a bit more of that fog that separates us from this ancient culture. With each discovery, we will learn a little bit more and can have a clearer picture of what life might have been like for the people in ancient Rome.